All right, welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're taking a look at something that I think is going to really resonate with a lot of you, especially if you're following the whole AI in healthcare space.
Absolutely.
We're diving into a paper called AI-Driven Decision Support in Oncology, Evaluating Data Readiness for Skin Cancer Treatment.
Catchy title.
Yeah, by Groeger and colleagues. And, you know, on the surface, it might seem like just another paper about the exciting potential of AI in medicine, but what really struck me is that this study takes a really hard look at whether the data we're currently collecting is actually good enough to build these, you know, these amazing AI tools that we keep hearing about.
Yeah.
Specifically for helping doctors make treatment decisions for patients with skin cancer.
Yeah, it's really about getting around to brass tacks, right? It's not just the theoretical potential of AI. You know, Groeger and his team over at the University Hospital Minster, they actually went and did the work to see if they could really build a working AI system to support oncologists.
Right.
And, you know, that's what I appreciate about this paper. You know, they focus on a specific type of AI called case-based reasoning, or CBR for short. And it's a really intuitive approach. Basically, the AI learns from a library of past patient cases and uses that knowledge to suggest potential treatments for patients with similar characteristics. You can think of it like, you know, a doctor drawing on their experience with previous patients to inform their decisions, but at a much larger and more systematic scale. But the central question they had, and the one they really dug into in this study, is the data that we currently have up to snuff? Is it actually good enough to train these kinds of AI systems effectively?
Right. Because you could have the most brilliant algorithm in the world, but if you feed it garbage in, garbage out, it's not going to produce anything worthwhile.
Exactly. And that's precisely what they discovered. A lot of crucial information that doctors need to make treatment decisions is either buried in unstructured text, like doctor's notes, or it's just plain missing from the records.
Yeah, it's almost like we're talking about two different worlds colliding here.
Right.
You have the world of clinical practice, which is, you know, understandably messy and complex. And then you have this world of AI and machine learning that thrives on data that's clean, structured, and complete.
Yeah, and they did a great job of outlining their process too. So they had this 6-step investigation, a very systematic approach.
Okay.
And, you know, they started with the groundwork. Okay, what are we looking at? You know, what's the scope? And then they went into this detailed mapping of all the potential data sources within their hospital system.
Wow.
They looked at everything: hospital information systems, or HIS.
Right.
Lab information systems, LIS. Radiology information systems, RIS. They even tapped into state cancer registries to get as complete a picture as possible. And then they took it a step further and actually extracted data from 5 real patients with complex skin cancer histories.
Wow. Okay, so they're not just theorizing about this, they're going right to the source.
Right into the trenches of the data. And this step was really about getting their hands dirty.
Yeah.
Seeing what they were working with in terms of the rawness, the quality of the data itself. They weren't trying to build a complete AI model just yet. This was about understanding the raw materials.
I see. Yeah, it's kind of like assessing the ingredients before you even start cooking, right?
Exactly. Before you start baking that AI cake.
Exactly.
You need to know what you're working with.
So what did they find when they really started to analyze this data?
Well, this data discovery phase is where it got really interesting. They applied these established quality criteria from the literature, you know, like how up-to-date the information is, the accuracy, the completeness, how much can you trust the data? And they didn't just rely on these abstract criteria.
Okay.
They also went and talked to the real experts, the dermatologists who are on the front lines making these treatment decisions day in and day out.
Right.
They actually surveyed them, held workshops with them
Wow.
to really drill down into what specific data points are absolutely essential when you're deciding on a course of action for a patient.
So what kinds of data were they actually working with? Was it all those lab reports and scans and things like that?
So they looked at a whole range of stuff. They had structured data like the entries from the ONDIS cancer registry, basic personal information, records of hospital stays, diagnoses that are coded using the ICD system.
Right.
procedures coded with OPS, lab test results.
Right, that makes sense.
Pretty standard stuff. But what was really striking is that they also had this massive amount of unstructured data. Over 43,000 free text documents.
Wow.
Think about that for a second.
Okay.
That's like a mountain of doctor's notes.
Right.
Radiology reports, pathology findings, all this information that's incredibly rich.
Right.
Full of detailed insights for a human who can read and understand it, but incredibly difficult for a machine learning algorithm.
Yeah. You can't just feed that raw text into an AI.
Exactly. AI doesn't just magically understand human language like that, right?
Right.
It needs things to be a bit more organized, a bit more structured.
Digestible.
Exactly.
So what kinds of problems did they run into when they started looking at all this data?
So as you can imagine, limitations started popping up. For instance, they couldn't even fully determine the accuracy, trustworthiness, or even the basic completeness of all those free text notes, which is a huge problem if you're trying to train an AI to make really important decisions about patient care.
You got to know that the data you're feeding it is reliable.
You got it. You can't build a reliable system on shaky foundations. And that's just the beginning. They also found all sorts of inconsistencies in how information was recorded in these notes. Different doctors use different terms for the same condition, abbreviations everywhere. And those abbreviations could have multiple meanings depending on the context. They even found a mix of German and English terminology within the same record.
Wow. It's like trying to put together a puzzle where all the pieces are from different puzzles.
Right. It's just chaos.
Exactly.
So even the structured data, the stuff that you would think would be more organized, like lab values and procedure codes.
Yeah. Even that wasn't perfect.
They had problems there too.
Even that wasn't totally clean. It was generally in better shape than those free text notes. But even there, you'd find inconsistencies.
Yeah.
Sometimes even bits of free text would sneak in. It's like they couldn't escape it.
But here's the real kicker. They took all this data that they'd analyzed, and compared it to what the dermatologists had told them in those workshops. What do you actually need to make these critical treatment decisions? And there's a huge gap.
Okay, so what were the doctors actually looking for that wasn't always there?
So the clinicians listed 41 specific data points that they considered important. You know, things like the specific genetic markers, the exact stage of the tumor, what treatments the patient had already received, but also really important social factors, like the patient's ability to get around, their overall quality of life, stuff that really impacts treatment choices. You know, it's not just about the disease itself, it's about the whole person. And here's where the gap becomes really apparent. Of those 41 relevant data points, only 13 were easily accessible in that nicely structured cancer registry data. Another 20 were present in the hospital information system, but 15 of those were trapped in that unstructured free text.
Oh, so close, but so far away.
Exactly. Buried in the mountain of notes. But here's the most worrying part. 8 absolutely crucial data points were missing entirely from their current data collection practices.
8. Like completely missing.
Completely MIA. Things like, how is the tumor progressing in specific organs, the patient's willingness to travel for clinical trials, their current quality of life?
Wow.
All this information that doctors need to make the best possible treatment decisions.
It's kind of amazing to think about all this untapped knowledge.
It is. It's sitting right there.
Like hidden in plain sight almost.
Exactly.
You know, I remember learning about the history of information retrieval systems in one of my computer science classes.
Oh, yeah.
And how they used to struggle with making sense of unstructured text. It was a huge bottleneck.
Oh, yeah.
Before they came up with better ways of indexing and tagging information.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. It seems like we're kind of in a similar situation with healthcare data.
Yeah.
Even though we've moved to electronic records, we haven't quite solved this fundamental problem.
Right.
Of getting the data into a format that AI can really sink its teeth into.
It's not just about having a lot of data.
No.
It's about having the right kind of data.
The right data in the right format. And of course, it has to be high quality.
Right. Garbage in, garbage out.
Exactly.
And that's really the key takeaway I got from this paper. We can get all excited about the potential for AI to revolutionize oncology and treatment. But if we don't address this fundamental data readiness problem, those breakthroughs are going to be a lot slower in coming.
And this isn't just about skin cancer.
No.
This is probably true for many other areas of oncology and even medicine more broadly.
Right.
Think about all the different specialties that deal with complex patient data. Cardiology, neurology, you name it.
Yeah.
They're all grappling with similar challenges. And I think that's what makes this paper so valuable.
Right. Yeah.
It's not just a theoretical discussion. It's a real-world case study that highlights the importance of getting the data right.
So if we were to really dive deep into one specific challenge here, let's talk about that mountain of unstructured medical data they found.
Okay, yeah.
Those 43,000 plus free text forms.
Right.
Extracting useful and reliable information from that kind of text, that's a huge undertaking in itself, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's a whole research field on its own. And as the paper points out, medical language is just full of these little quirks and complexities that can really trip up even the most advanced AI.
Okay.
For example, you've got neologisms, these new medical terms that pop up all the time that might not be in any standard vocabulary.
Right.
And then there are abbreviations everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
Which can mean different things, depending on the context or even the specific doctor or hospital. And then to make things even more fun, you've got negated statements.
Okay.
You know, like no evidence of recurrence.
Right.
The AI needs to be able to understand not just what's there, but also what's explicitly not there.
Right. It's not just about recognizing words.
No, it's about understanding the meaning.
It's about understanding the context.
Exactly. And that's really difficult.
So you hear a lot about natural language processing, NLP, and these large language models, the LLMs.
Right. The LLMs, everyone's talking about them.
As being, potential solutions to this problem.
Yeah.
But it seems like there's still some pretty big hurdles to overcome.
Oh, there are, yeah. And this paper does a good job of highlighting those. You need massive, high-quality data sets to train these models effectively.
To teach them the nuances of medical language.
Yeah, all the subtleties, all the jargon.
Right, and then there's the whole issue of bias.
Oh, that's a big one, yeah.
Which could lead to all sorts of problems if the training data isn't representative of the real world.
Absolutely. It could lead to inaccuracies, unfair outcomes.
Yeah.
And even if you had the perfect NLP model or the perfect LLM, it would still take a huge effort to get the right information out of these medical texts.
It's not just plug and play, right?
No, not at all. It's a very active area of research.
So thinking about all this, it's interesting to consider how we got to this point. The idea of using computers to help with medical decisions.
Right.
That's not exactly new, right?
No, clinical decision support systems have been around for a while, but the real game changer is the introduction of these sophisticated AI and machine learning techniques.
Especially ones that can actually learn from data like case-based reasoning.
Yeah, that's where things are getting really interesting. And, we've seen this huge shift in medical record keeping.
Right, from paper to electronic health records.
Exactly. And that's been great in a lot of ways.
Yeah?
It's made data more accessible.
Right, more organized.
More organized in some ways, but it hasn't magically solved these problems.
Right.
Of data quality and structure that we need for these AI systems.
It reminds me of how everyone used to be so excited about big data in healthcare.
Oh, yeah.
Like just having mountains of data was going to solve everything.
Right. We just drown the problems in data.
But this study shows that's not enough.
No.
It's not just about quantity.
It's about quality. It's about having the right data.
So just to kind of crystallize some of the key points here.
Okay.
What are some of the big takeaways?
All right. So takeaway number one.
Okay.
If we want to see AI-driven clinical decision support systems really take off in oncology, especially for skin cancer, we need to get serious about data readiness.
Okay.
Takeaway number two.
Yeah.
That unstructured clinical data, those doctor's notes, it's a treasure trove of information, but it's also a huge obstacle right now because it's hard to reliably extract, standardize, and use that information for AI.
Okay.
Number three, crucial patient-centric data, things like their social situation, their quality of life, those are often missing.
Right.
Or they're not easily accessible in our current systems. And finally, number four, we need to move towards more standardized documentation practices. And that might even mean using AI-powered tools.
Right, to help doctors document things in a more structured way.
Exactly.
So what are the real-world implications of all this? What happens if we don't address these challenges?
Well, the potential for AI to really make a difference in treating cancer, in personalizing care, in improving outcomes for patients, that potential is going to be really limited.
It's not just a theoretical problem, right?
No, this is about real people.
This is about patients who could benefit from these technologies
Exactly.
if we can get the data right.
Yeah.
And what they found in this study at the University Hospital Minster, those data limitations, they're probably not unique to that one hospital.
Probably not, no.
This is likely a reflection of what's happening in healthcare systems all over the place.
Yeah, it's a systemic issue.
Yeah.
And it highlights the importance of data governance, data interoperability.
Right, making sure those different systems can talk to each other.
Exactly. And focusing on data quality from the start.
Okay, so I think that brings us to our novel notions segment.
All right, let's get creative.
Where we take these findings and we think about potential research directions, new ideas that could come out of this work.
Okay.
So one thing that really struck me was that gap between the data that the doctors said they needed
Right.
and the data that was actually available.
Yeah, that 41 data points versus what they could actually find.
So what if we could develop a system
Okay.
that proactively helps clinicians collect the missing information,
I like where you're going with this.
like while they're interacting with the patient?
Okay, yeah.
Maybe call it a prospective data enhancement framework.
Ooh, I like that. Prospective data enhancement framework.
So imagine, the doctor's in the room with the patient. They're discussing treatment options.
Okay.
And this AI system is kind of like a helpful assistant that reminds them, hey, don't forget to document the patient's preferences
Right.
about treatment location, or, hey, it's time to administer that quality of life questionnaire.
Ooh.
Things like that.
And you could even take it a step further. Imagine the system is actually listening to the conversation,
Wow.
using speech recognition and NLP to understand what's being said,
Yeah.
and then intelligently suggesting relevant data points that should be documented.
So instead of trying to clean up the data mess after the fact,
Right, which is incredibly time-consuming and
but
difficult.
are building quality in from the beginning.
Exactly. Design data readiness into the process itself. I love it.
What kind of research do you think would be needed to really explore this idea?
Well, first off, we need to make sure that the system is actually user-friendly for clinicians.
Right, because if it's too cumbersome.
It'll just get in the way. So we need research into good user interface design. We need to look into active learning techniques to figure out which data points are most critical to collect in different situations.
Right, because it's probably not going to be the same for every patient.
Exactly. And of course, we need to rigorously test whether this framework actually improves the completeness and quality of the data.
Right. Does it actually work? And does it make the clinicians' lives easier or harder?
Exactly. We want to make their lives easier, not harder. If we can get this right, I think it could be a real game changer.
Yeah.
We could start building these rich, comprehensive data sets that are much better suited for training AI systems.
This is a really cool idea. So to kind of bring this all together to this deep dive into the research by Groeger and colleagues, it's clear that AI has the potential to really change how we approach cancer treatment decisions.
Especially in areas like skin cancer.
Yeah, but we're still facing this huge challenge of making sure the clinical data we collect is good enough
Good enough, yeah.
to actually power these AI tools.
High quality, complete, structured.
And this paper does a great job of showing us where we are right now
Yeah.
and highlighting the areas where we need to improve: data collection, standardization, and finding ways to use all that unstructured information that's out there.
Absolutely. And it leaves our listeners with this final thought that we have this vast amount of information hidden in those medical records.
Right.
What new approaches, what new technologies might we need to unlock the full potential of all that data?
That's a great question. Definitely something to ponder.
Some food for thought.
And as always, if you want to dive into the details of this research yourself, you can find a link to the paper in the episode description.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.